Well, hello again, and thank you for joining me in my kitchen. Today we're going to make pinto beans and cornbread, and it's early morning right now, and I'm getting ready to go to work, so I just wanted to show you that this is a very easy meal to make, especially if you're someone who has a job. So what you want to do though, this isn't a meal that you can just say, oh, I want to make pintos tonight. You really need to plan this ahead. You need to buy a bag of your dried pintos, and you need to go ahead and wash the pintos and then put them in a very large pot and fill it up with water. And you want at least 3 inches of water over the top of the pintos. And you are going to let that set overnight so that they'll soak up that water and then they'll cook faster. So this is something that you can do ahead of time. So last night when I was cooking dinner, I went ahead and washed my pintos and I drained them, put them in a large pot, filled them up with water, and this morning they're all plump and nice and ready to go. So I've also gone ahead and sprayed my crock pot because this is going to cook it all day while I'm at work. Last night when I was making dinner, I went ahead and did some prep work for the pintos. I took a green pepper that I had that was getting ready to go bad in the fridge. I don't always put green pepper with my pintos, but this one was starting to go bad. I wanted to use it, so I chopped that up, and I chopped it into pretty large pieces because they are going to cook all day, and you don't want to come home and just have tiny little slimy pieces of whatever you put in it. I chopped 2 ribs of celery and 1 large onion, and again I made these into big chunks so that they don't just fall apart and go to nothing. So what you want to do before you go to work is you will take your pintos that have soaked overnight and you'll put those in your crock pot, and then you'll add your vegetables. And you don't have to add celery and pepper. I would make sure that you do add an onion. It just makes it really good. And the other thing that I like to add is a ham hock. And you can buy this at the grocery store. It's just a smoked ham hock. And that just gives it some really good flavor. So I'm just going to kind of push that down in there. And then I'm going to add a teaspoon of baking soda. I don't know if it works or not, but this is the way I was always told. Add the baking soda, and it will take some of the gas out of the beans. So we're going to add that. And then if you want to have a Cajun pinto, you can add your favorite Cajun spice, which Creole seasoning, which we like this Tony Cachier's. We use this all through the fall when we're doing our tailgates because it's just a really nice Cajun spice. So I'm going to sprinkle about 2 teaspoons of that. It's very salty, so you don't, if you add your spice to your pintos, check it, make sure if there's salt in it, don't add extra salt. If there's no salt in it, then you can salt and pepper your pintos. So we're going to turn that on low. We're going to add some water. You can also add chicken broth. And we just want to make sure that everything is covered with liquid so that we don't come home to a burnt mess. So it looks like we're going to add about 4 cups of water. And this is going to make a very large pot of pinto beans. And if you've never had pintos and you're like, I don't know if I would even like it, pintos are very inexpensive. They're very high in protein. They're low in fat. And if you don't like them, you can always just take out of the crock pot the ham and the vegetables and put your beans in a freezer container. I don't have them right here, but I like to buy the small freezer containers. You can put a cup or a cup and a half or 2 cups, whatever you think you might use. Put them in the freezer containers, freeze them, then you can bring those out when you're having tacos and you can mash them up and make refried beans. Or you could use them in another soup recipe. Or we're going to be making a calico bean bake later on this year. And so I will probably put some of mine back for that because it's just better to use the beans that you cooked versus just opening a can, which has a lot more sodium in it. So if you don't like them just by themselves, go ahead and cook them, try them. If you don't like them, freeze them, and then you'll have them for more recipes in the future. So I've covered this with water, and we are going to put the lid on. we have it on low, and I'm going to go to work. And then when I come back this afternoon or this evening, we will start the video again, and we will check our pintos and make some really good homemade cornbread. So I hope you'll be here with me. Thanks. Okay, so I'm home from work, and my pintos look really good, and they smell so good. So those are ready. We just need to make our cornbread. Now, the cornbread I'm going to be making is made in a cast iron skillet. And this recipe in my cookbook, it's called Daddy's Cornbread, and it is my father's recipe, and he showed me how to make it, and I've been making it for my boys, and his mother made it for him. So I always like to use recipes that have been handed down generation to generation, but this recipe is not sweet. If you're looking for a sweet cornbread, this is not it. This recipe has no sugar in it. Where I'm from growing up, if you put sugar in it, it's no longer cornbread, it's corn cake. So this is cornbread, and it is to be eaten with butter, nice and hot and melted butter all over it. So you start with your iron skillet, and what you're going to do, let me grab a spatula, you're just going to put a 1/4 cup of shortening into your skillet, and you're going to turn your oven up to 425 on bake, and you're going to stick the skillet into your oven and leave it there until all of the shortening has melted. So, I don't know if you can see, but there's my shortening, one big chunk, and I'm going to now put it in the oven. Okay, sorry about that. Feeling myself tonight, but I wanted to tell you, while that Crisco or shortening is in the oven, you can make your side dish if you want to do another side. Normally I would have collard greens with my pintos, but I married a Yankee and he doesn't like collard greens, but he does like cooked spinach, so tonight I'm going to cook up some spinach. Now, a friend of mine told me today that she just puts oil, olive oil, and garlic in a pan, adds her spinach, you can do fresh or frozen, and then cooks it up with just the garlic and olive oil. I'm actually doing olive oil, garlic, salt, and then to fool my brain into thinking maybe I'm actually going to have collard greens, which I know I'm not, but I have found this great little spice called bacon salt, and it actually does make whatever you put it in taste like you put bacon in it without all the fat of the bacon. So I'm going to add that to my cooking spinach, and then I'm going to run and get my pan out of the oven. That doesn't take very long for the shortening to come together, so I'm just going to run and get that. Alright, so our cast iron skillet is out and all of the shortening has melted and it's nice and hot. So we're going to put together our cornbread. Now the recipe calls for self-rising flour and self-rising cornmeal. We're going to use a cup of flour and 2 cups of cornmeal. You don't have to have self-rising flour. As a matter of fact, if self-rising flour and self-rising cornmeal are not something that you use all the time, I would suggest that you either buy the smallest package that you can find, or you just use regular flour, and you can add to every cup of flour or cornmeal, you can add 1½ teaspoons of baking powder and 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and that will be the same as the self-rising flour or the self-rising cornmeal. And the reason you may want to do that is if you don't use those self-rising products for very long or that often, they do have a shelf life and they will not work properly if you've had them in your cabinet for a long time. So we're going to start with a cup of flour, and again, I'm just using plain flour. So I'm going to add to that 1½ teaspoons of baking soda and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I'm also using regular cornmeal, not self-rising. It's just yellow plain cornmeal. And I need 2 cups of cornmeal. I'll just measure that out. That's 1/2 cup. 1. Doesn't want to come out. 1 1/2. And since I am using the plain flour and the plain cornmeal, I am then going to add, since I have 3 cups total, I'm going to add, well, it'll be 4.5 teaspoons of baking powder and 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Let me grab a fork. I'll mix that all up. I don't know if you can see it. I'll hold it up here. So it's just your flour and your cornmeal. 1 cup of flour, 2 cups of cornmeal if you're using self-rising. If you're using plain, you add the 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder and 1/2 teaspoon of salt to the flour, and the 3 teaspoons of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of salt to the cornmeal, because we had 2 cups. Alright, then we're going to add milk. It is 1.5 cups of milk. Let me tilt this a little bit so you can see a little bit better. And just blend that together. You don't need a mixer, it just mixes right up. And you're also going to add to that 1/4 cup of vegetable oil, which I already have measured out. Now mine, I need a little bit more milk, so I'm going to go grab that. Okay, so I'm going to add just a little bit more milk to it, and then I'm going to show you the consistency that you're going for. Because you want it, should be able to pour it out of your bowl. It shouldn't have to be spooned out. You should be able to pour it out. Okay, so if you can see this, how it's drippy. Now we're going to bring our pan over. And we're going to pour the batter right into the hot oil. Now my dad would take the oil that I put in the batter and he would just not put it in the batter but then pour it on top. You can do that as well. That's actually the better way to do it. So just mix your flour, your cornmeal, your salt, your milk, pour it in your pan, and then you can pour your 1/4 cup of shortening over top. And I don't know if you can see it. Ooh, that's hot. But the oil kind of comes up over top. And then we will bake that in a 425-degree oven for 20 to 25 minutes or until golden brown. So we're going to stick that back in the oven. Now, turn my spinach down. I hope that you will try this cornbread. When it comes out of the oven tonight before we eat, I will take a picture of it and put that up on the website so you can kind of see what it looks like. But it takes 20 to 25 minutes to cook. It will get a nice golden brown on top. Then you can just cut it into like 6 or 8, kind of like you cut a pie, and serve it straight out of the skillet. Or you can flip it out of the skillet and cut it however you like. But we will have our pintos, which I'm going to show you what they look like. With our ham hock in there, and then we will serve that with our cornbread and with our cooked spinach, or if you like, you could do the collard greens. Now, if you have fresh collard greens, I like to just throw them in a pan with some oil and bacon, some bacon grease and salt, and let them just kind of cook down really good. So I hope that you'll try the pintos, and remember, if you don't like them, just go ahead and take the pintos out, divide them into equal parts, and freeze them in freezer containers, and then you can use them for fried beans, or in a couple of weeks when we make the calico bean bake. So thanks, and I hope that you enjoy it.